Well, I should start off. A good point to start off is kind of where I approximately landed on the last video, which was number 4, I think. I numbered them because I intended to make them several videos at a time. Well, I was in hospital, as I explained, having some foot surgery. Got to put my belt on so it stops that noise. So while I was in hospital, I was visited by a friend. This is a friend that I had mentioned before, who also was not very happy about being in the army and had made probably the same mistake as I did. And the father, certainly in my case, my father had, for the best reasons possible, had helped me to get accepted into the army. I'd actually taken a test to go into the Navy because I wanted to go in and be a diver, because I was interested in that. I liked swimming. That was one of my sports, and I'm still going down to the road. Of course, it's very narrow, and there's kids and motorcycles and other kinds of obstacles. So I actually failed the test to go into the Navy. What I didn't realize back then, for lack of an experienced father or parent, my parents were just common folk, not very well educated. Certainly they were of Irish descent. Not that that means that they had no education, but they were second generation, I think, Irish, making me third. So I should have just gone and done the test again, and I would have passed it the second time, who knows. But I gave up because I didn't, as I say, I didn't have better counselling. Somebody else passing on the road. So I end up in the army, and I end up in hospital, and I was there for I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I think. So this friend visits me, and he's got out of the army. Now, we had a lot in common, this friend of mine, but actually we didn't continue to be friends, even though we knew each other later in civilian life. But he came to me to tell me how to get out, and what he had done. This is at the time when the British Army was downsizing, and my friend's suggestion, my friend's advice was that if you acted up mentally, then you could get out of the army. And what he had done, he had pretended to be now a lot of people are going to find this extreme. We're sorry that when you are in something, by way of a disclaimer, when you are trapped in something that you're going, it's literally like being in prison. Even though those who are in prison will say, oh no, it's not. Believe me, when you've signed on, and you've signed on for something that's going to hold you there, for in my case, when he was talking to me, I had another 7 years to go, trapped in a life which was strangling me. And what he had done is he had gone AWOL, absent without leave. Now you can go, obviously you can desert, but desertion is one where you disappear and you're never seen again until you perhaps get caught when you're caught up in some legal requirement, like getting a driver's license or something, and somebody cops that you are AWOL from the army or a service. So anyway, he had gone AWOL, made his way down to London, and when he was in London, this is his story as he gave it to me. He walked around one particular place near Piccadilly Circus where you could walk around a block, and it was a very small block, like just several buildings. It's still there. Well, he walked around, and while he walked around, he took pills. And he took pills until he passed out. And he passed out on the pavement. And of course, he was found. He didn't smell of beer, so people knew that something had happened. And he was taken to hospital. He was taken to hospital where they very, very quickly found that he had overdosed on phenobarbital, I think it was, he said he took. So he was then declared an attempted suicide. Now he's returned to the army, and he gets taken to a place called Netley. And Netley was for the want of a better description, it was the mental institution that was specifically for the armed personnel. So I guess Army, Navy would go there, and if they required treatment they would go there. And he had been taken to that hospital, and he was seen by a psychiatrist, and he told them that he was afraid that he was going to kill somebody, so he decided to take his own life. Now, he had never intended to take his own life. What he had done is he had made it obvious that he had taken a lot of pills by having the full bottles in one pocket and the empty bottles in the other. So they assumed that for all the empty bottles he had taken all of those pills from those bottles. So once again, desperate situations require desperate solutions. Now, he really did go the whole way to convincing them that he was in a bad way. And he said, all that you have to do is to do that. And because they are downsizing at the moment, they really don't want people who don't want to be in the army. Now, I actually found that this was not true. It wasn't as easy as this, because later, when I was in Africa, I tried to do the same thing. But I'll deal with that in another video. So I don't have any shame, but I don't have any shame for anything that I did when I was in the army. I was very unhappy, and my solution then as a young man, as a young kid, was to do what I did. Now I went a different route on that. It seemed to me that what he had done was a huge risk, because if nobody had tried to help him when he said he passed out, then he could have died. And much as I didn't like the army, I just wasn't really ready to do something that could be such a great risk to me. And plus, whether it's true or not, whether it's accurate or not, at Netley, they actually were doing what was then extreme, what can we say, extreme solutions for people who were mentally unstable. And he risked that as well. So at that time, you had electric shock treatment and you had the frontal lobotomy, and that was another thing that could have been sent his way. Now, if you saw One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you will have seen that the main hero, Jack Nicholson, in the end, because of his obstructive behaviour and because he was enemies with Nurse Ratched, he was given the lobotomy, because it showed the lobotomy in an extreme light in that movie, because I know this because I actually spoke to a family later, and I was going on at one point, one of those embarrassing moments when you know your mouth is running away with you without finding out who you're talking to. And I said that terrible things were being done in psychiatry and that people were being lobotomized, and that was a terrible thing. It turned them into a zombie, a la One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And it turned out that the family that I was talking to, their mother, who had extreme mental instability and couldn't be trusted to even stay at home. Probably she would be regarded as having Alzheimer's now, but back then she had been diagnosed as needing the lobotomy, and that was a solution back then, and she was given the lobotomy. Well, that family said that actually it helped. They admitted that their mother wasn't the same anymore, but at least she didn't disappear and get lost and do such unpredictable, crazy things. So I guess some of the lessons that I learned back then were that when you go in for extreme solutions, it can work both ways. So that I'm stuck in the army, and I have to find a solution to keep myself sane. Now, I know that there's a whole thing about the army of one, and in the movies, Hollywood has glorified on many different occasions. It's glorified the idea of being a Marine, and you are always a Marine, and you come out of the army and you're a Marine. One of Beth's favourite movies is of a guy that was in the army, and he was out in Afghanistan, and he took a hit, he took a near hit when he was in action, and one of the things, he was miraculously saved. Something happened and it was a miracle, and in the miracle he found a picture of a woman, and when he got out of the army he resolved to find that woman because he felt that she had saved his life in some strange way. So the portrayal of a Marine coming out with all of his training, and he's tough, and you don't mess with him, and he knows how to fight, and he knows, and all of these things were all very true, but the conditioning is severe when you're in the army, and that's really what I should talk about now, is the conditioning that we are subjected to at all of the different places in our lives. Now, I watched the thing on Facebook just today, and they had a guy, an actor, a well-known black actor with beautiful dark brown voice, and he is talking about the inner voice, the voice that is never wrong. He said, you will learn to listen to your inner voice, and your inner voice is never wrong. Sometimes it speaks clearly, but sometimes it speaks in a whisper, but it's never wrong. It will tell you who you should spend your life with. It will tell you, and of course this inner voice is an unbelievable, undeniable voice of wisdom. And the problem that I've found is that it's also buried in a lot of other voices. And you've got your mother in there, you've got your father, you've got uncles, aunties, sisters, brothers, teachers, enemies, friends, and all of these people have a voice in your head. Now, one of the popular ways of describing someone is, in that case, it says that he was listening, he had voices in his head, and he was listening to voices, and the voices were telling him to kill people. Yeah, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about everyday people who have what are called limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs. This is what some systems of belief talk about, is limiting beliefs. And we do all have limiting beliefs. There's no question. I know that very often these limiting beliefs have you behaving in a certain way. They'll have you behaving in ways which are like your brother, like your sister, like your mother. I find myself always repeating something that my mother said to me. If as a kid I'd taken something home that didn't belong to me, and she said, where did you get that? I would say, I found it in the street, Mum. Well, who does it belong to? Well, it didn't belong to anybody. It was just lying in the street. Well, it must belong to someone. No, it doesn't belong to anybody. So I can have it. And she would look at me, and she would look right through me, and she would say, I believe you. Thousands wouldn't. I later learned that that was a quote from Shakespeare, which I'm sure my mother didn't know. But anyway, there's one example of that. My mother used to say, if she couldn't quite get to the bottom of something, she would say, you're as deep as the ocean. No one will ever get to the bottom of you. And you get landed with things like that. I was actually with parents who really did their best with me. I had a few, what in Manchester would call a good hiding. Oh yes, he gave him a good hiding. I had a few good hidings. I had a few beatings. I had a few punishments. I got knocked about when my father came home, and he'd had a few drinks, and he had told me expressly not to stir into the next street to play, and I did, and my mother had to stop him from doing real harm. It's about the only thing that I can ever remember getting whacked for. So we all have this, and it comes usually in the form of verbal abuse, that we are landed with things which we think are true. So obviously if someone tries to give you a good hiding and instill in you a false belief in yourself or about yourself, those are the easy ones. They're the easy ones to get rid of. But there are others which tell you that you can't draw, or you can't paint, or you'll never play an instrument, or you'll never be able to take care of yourself, or you're completely disorganized, and all of these things, they float around in your head, and they can have the power, command power over you. See, so whenever you go to do something, if you have been abused in some verbal way and told that you can't do anything, that you're a failure, many people have this kind of abuse, which is loaded onto them and which continues to be repeated in their mind. This is one of the reasons that you must be very careful about your choice of friends. I met someone when I first came here, and eventually I stopped seeing him because he was so negative and destructive in his speech and in his way and his actions, that I decided this is not good for me. And it came with gradual realization. If I was going over in my mind a conversation that I'd had with this person, and I realized it was all negative. I was taking part in a mental reconstruction of a conversation in which I was repeating the negative garbage that this particular person liked to impart to anybody. So we all have these. So how do we deal? And dealing with these things is a major component of accessing the success which we are all capable of. Now, when I say that we're all capable of being successful, not everybody is going to be a great architect. Not everybody is going to be a great engineer. Not everybody is going to be a great piano player, but they may want to be. I read once of the stories of many famous people who had gone on to be great pianists and great opera singers and great at what they did, but their heart was in doing something else, and that was very revealing to me. Now, we can be told something about ourselves which we take as being true, which is completely false. And the anecdotal evidence that I offer for that is the story that I heard, which made sense to me, was of the classical pianist who had studied very, very hard and was doing very, very well. But his parents were quite influential and educated, and managed to get him to see a great maestro who was known in his field as being a great authority on classical concert pianists. And they got their son in to meet this man. Well, obviously there's a piano, there's a beautiful grand piano there, and the maestro says, perhaps you would like to play something for me. So the man plays his best piece, and he plays it beautifully. And he looks then to the maestro for the encouragement that he expects to get. The maestro considers himself for a moment, and then he says, You obviously have some talent for the piano, but what I recommend to you is that you quit the piano and that you find something, some skill that you can develop that will give you a good life. That's my advice to you. And the man took this to heart, and even though it made him very unhappy, he became an engineer. And as an engineer, he became very, very successful, and he earned a great deal of money. And he found that he had an aptitude for that, and he had a good life. And in later years, he meets socially, he meets the maestro. And he says to the maestro, "Sir, you probably don't remember me." He said, I used to play the piano, and I had an interview with you. And I want to thank you because you gave me some good advice. You told me to quit the piano and to find a line of work which would give me a good life. So that I followed that advice, and I have indeed, just as you predicted, I've had a good life, and I want to thank you for that advice. And the maestro listened to this and he said, "Actually, I do remember you. You came to me and you played beautifully. And I considered that you would become a great, great concert pianist." So he said, "I'm surprised at what you have told me." And the man is aghast. He said, "But you told me you listened to me play, and you told me to give up." And the maestro said, "I tell everybody that. I tell everybody who comes to me, as you did, for my opinion, and I tell them, give up. Don't do it. It's going to be too difficult for you. You're not talented enough." He said, "Now, the ones who are destined to be great will discount what I say, will tell me, I'm not going to listen to that. I am going to be a great pianist, and you will be hearing from me in the future." He said, they go on and they make a success of their life no matter what anybody says. They will go their own way, and they will make their success and find their life in what they love. Only the people who don't have the courage and the persistence to carry through to their dream will listen to what I said. And so I always thought that this was a classic example of voices that tell us to give up. The voices in our heads are not ours. How do you work out then? Perhaps the lesson is, how do you work out what is the voice that you should be listening to? Is it the voice of your brother that told you that you were a pain in the butt? Is it the voice of your father who told you to shape up and get a proper job? Is it the voice of your mother who said that thousands wouldn't believe you? Is it these voices? Or is it the voice which sometimes is a lone voice telling you that you can be great at what you want to do and to do what you believe in? You need to get the other voices out of there. So what you should do is you should listen to all of those voices. And as soon as you find, wait a minute, that's my brother, you take that voice and you tell them, you're not talking anymore in this room of my mind. And you look for the next voice. Maybe it's your mother, maybe it's your teacher, maybe it's your ex-wife or husband. But the voice will be there, and it will be recognizable. Like the person that I told you, I eventually told him, I'm not spending any more time with you, you're bad for me. That voice which is destructive to you, you need to identify it and get it the hell out of there. Now, when do you stop? You stop when there is one recognizable voice and you know that it's you. And then, as that actor with the deep brown voice said, that voice is never wrong. So maybe the lesson for this is to realize that there are many voices, many people, and they don't all love you. There are haters and lovers, coming back to that again, And you need to find out who is the one that you should be listening to, because in the end, it's only really you in there when you close your eyes to sleep. And that's enough for now.